أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله أصحابه أجمعين. My dear respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Sure. You know, from up on the stage, it's really weird because you look out and you're like, okay, Imam Zayd like really gave his heart into the speech. So when the salam comes after that speech, you'd be like, yeah, I'm going to take on the world kind of salam. So let's try that again. Not screaming salam, just acknowledgement salam. Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, there you go. Alhamdulillah. Thank you. So the first thing I do is that ask those who are like behind the camera sort of, to just start to move up. The way in the back, just move up. Yeah, because there's no extra charge in these seats in the front, inshallah. It's helpful, like it's just to kind of fill up the thing. Now, I want to welcome you first and foremost to the convention. Of course, the Muslim Student Association is like really the core of who I am and where my journey began. So the session title is very appropriate, and Imam Zayd laid out a very a profound framework of how to look at life itself in the context of blessings, because you could look at it from so many different ways. What I intend to do is, inshallah, walk us through at least 2 or 3 things. Number one, what do we mean? And Imam Zayd has a session to go to, so inshallah, so we will bid him farewell, so it doesn't look like we're talking as he's leaving. And Hassan, that's your cue as also Hassan for you to go to. Jazakallah khair. So the idea is that I'm going to talk about these 3 things. One is, what are these sort of messages about the journey, about light descending? What are we talking about? What are we trying to get to? And how did this come about that we're addressing these things? Number 2 is that how can we make this relevant to your lives on the college campuses, and inshallah, what benefit can what benefit can be derived from that? And then lastly, what at the convention and conference can you do? So let me get a sense of who's in the audience. How many of you are currently in college? Raise your hands. Raise your hand if you're in college, right? Alhamdulillah. How many of you are in high school? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you are done with college? Raise your hand. Yeah. Alhamdulillah. You think, right? You may go back. I don't know. Right? So, you know basically that this time that we're living in is by far the most blessed time for Islam. So if you can think about it this way, for me, this is how I approach life every single day. That if there was ever a time in the history of Islam after the life of the Prophet ﷺ, when anybody should have wanted to be alive after his life, after the death of most of the beloved companions, any other time in history somebody would have said, I want to be alive and I want to be a Muslim, it would be this time. And I'll give you reasons for why. When the Prophet ﷺ used to retreat to the cave of Hira and contemplate on society, he was not doing it in a way to be offensive or in a way to be demeaning or condescending. Metaphorically, he was going into the cave, looking down into the valley of Mecca, but he wasn't doing it to say, look at these people, Allah's curse be upon them, or anything like that. So his journey actually into Islam began with deep contemplation, with intense contemplation. And so one of the first things I always talk about is that we are facing some massive challenges, domestically, internationally, and it always, I teach for a living. I'm a professor at Howard University in DC, so I always want to know also, when I say something, what are the people in the audience thinking, right? So when I say international challenges, what comes to your mind when I say that?
War.
What is it? War. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. All right. What else? It's a song. I don't know if you know. What else? War. What else? Foreign policy comes to mind. Okay. All right. Any other things that come to mind internationally?
Chaos and turmoil.
Chaos and turmoil. Interesting, right? Chaos and turmoil, right? Domestically, you would say the same as above, right? Domestically, what comes to your mind? And you have to be more explicit, like say a little bit more, because clearly what I'm about to say is just going to be my perspective, and then if it doesn't resonate, we can't give you your money back for the registration, right? So what comes to mind domestically? What are the challenges we're facing domestically? Islamophobia. Right? Anybody know what that means? Right? I'm in social work and I wrote an article for the Encyclopedia on Islamophobia, but I really intentionally wanted to call it anti-Islamic bigotry. Because if anybody knows about counseling, psychology, psychiatry, social work, phobias, mostly I can work through it with you. If you're afraid of heights, then I can sort of do some counseling and therapy to help you ease into how to deal with heights. But so it's not a phobia, it's a hatred. It's intense hatred. What else? What else domestically? Islamophobia, anti-Islamic bigotry. What else? Seriously? Poverty. Poverty, right? What else? Naim Bey comes through. What is it? Racial inequality, right? So what are you thinking about when I talk about the contemporary challenges? So in my mind, basically they're laid out in these few ways. One is the growth of Islam in the 21st century has been so tremendous, population-wise, and also the knowledge and information available about it, that it has actually unseated and almost like thawed out some hatred that has existed for centuries. So suddenly people have said, God help us, what is going on here? That all these lands that we colonized for centuries and kept them in place, now not only are they awakening, they're starting to love Islam, their young people are practicing Islam, but then they're also coming to our shores. Like literally Syrians are arriving on the to the shores of Europe right now as we speak. So it has unfrozen, if you will, thawed out, hidden in intense hatred for a long time. So when the Prophet used to contemplate in the cave of Hira, the message that he was going to bring, the message of Tawheed that he was going to bring, was going to revolutionize the society of the time. Because for years, centuries, they had been frozen into idol worship, frozen into a way of life, frozen by basically responding to everything he said by saying, وَجَدْنَا أَبَاءَنَا, that we found our forefathers worshipping in this way, so now you're coming and messing us up. And you have to think about what that means, contemporary. How does that all impact us? Well, it does, because every time you walk on campus, every time you choose to practice Islam, to speak out and advocate, for yourself in terms of accommodations or for against injustices around the world, someone somewhere is saying, this is not what we anticipated this should be. That we had anticipated that after the attacks of September the 11th, that Muslims would go underground, that we wouldn't hear from them again, that they would actually be very quiet, they would be intimidated, they would feel embarrassed, they would feel afraid, they would feel anxious. And so, what happened? The journey began. And people who were not even Muslims started searching and researching into Islam and came up with the idea of what? That don't listen to what people are saying. Watch and see what Muslims are doing. And in broader society, it's too wide, too huge. But on a college campus, right? Who is here from like a 10,000 or above student body campus? Raise your hand if you're from a 10,000 University of Maryland. Where are you guys from? U of M, University of Michigan? There are other U of M's, you know that, right? Go blue, you're right. I'm Ohio State, bleed red all the time, right? Ohio State, anybody from a 5,000 student body or smaller? Where is that?
Benedictine.
Benedictine. And where is that? The one who just raised his hand? Okay, all right, okay. So just a hint, if you ever attend fundraising events, don't do what you just did. Don't raise your hand and then look back down, because it'll cost you like $10,000. Because I do fundraising, mashallah, but that would cost you a lot of money right there. Just saying, don't look away, just look at that. Yeah, all right. So in that campus of 5,000 or 10,000, if you have a sufficient student body presence as an MSA, you are now reducing that huge world into a very intense interaction on a daily basis. Suddenly people are with you in classes, They are with you in the elevator if you live in the residence halls, or if your classroom buildings have elevators. They're seeing you in the cafeterias, in the local restaurants, and they're coming face to face with Islam. The Prophet, peace be upon him, did not have that luxury. He had a small group of Muslims. In the earliest days, beginning with Iqra bi-ismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, the first verses, he had maybe, by the time the Battle of Badr was fought, about how many? About how many is the narration to say? About how many Muslims fought in the Battle of Badr to essentially make sure that Islam never dies out? About how many? 300 or about 13, right? Some narrations say somewhere around there. So can you imagine? What did they do as their journey of Islam and within Islam began? What did they do? And what do we have in terms of the resources and what we are able to, inshallah, and possibly do? So how did the Prophet ﷺ go from contemplation into lifelong commitment? Bottom line was what? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the earliest surahs, the Meccan surahs, connected human existence and creation with service to humanity. This is the essence of the journey. This is the essence of the journey. That right from the start, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have revealed all of the Medinan surahs. It was not impossible because revelation was in His control, in His domain. He could have easily reversed the trend and said, deliver all the societal system, economic system, financial system, political system, and just overwhelm them, and then also talk about the other things. But indeed, contemplation led to a lifelong commitment because the shortest of surahs began to get people to be conscious of the people around them. And suddenly say, if you want to get closer to God, if you want to get close to Allah, a deity, begin by turning to those who are nearest to you. أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُ الْيَتِيمِ. Look at the person who denies the day of judgment or recompense. What is the characteristic of those people? They push away the orphans. They hold back from the feeding of the needy. Somebody mentioned poverty. Somebody else mentioned war. War results in displacement. Displacement of crossing international borders results in refugees. So these are concurrent, simultaneous events. So poverty could have existed and war occurred. But now the situation of that poverty is intensified exponentially because whatever meager resources people had have been taken away. So Islam begins by looking at the human condition. So when you get to campus, you can't possibly start talking about doing the pie in the sky kind of things. Look around and say, how welcoming are we to the first young Muslim freshman, first year student, male or female, that walks onto that campus? Where is the MSA to tell that person, your journey is about to begin, but you're not going to be alone. We're going to be right there with you. We're going to be standing right there with you. And any questions you have on academics, on social life, we want you to have a social life, but we want you to have it in the company of other Muslims. Your spiritual concerns, we want to be there for you. This is not happening because we're going pie in the sky. We want to solve all the problems and forget the individual. Forget the people most in need. We sometimes think and assume that somebody may have a name that's Muslim sounding, but they may have simply been born into a Muslim family and they perhaps never had access to a place where they could study Islam in a comfortable, nurturing way. And the college becomes their place to do it. So if you look at the earliest da'wah that the Prophet, peace be upon him, did, it was intense da'wah. The secret da'wah, if you will, because the opposition, the bigotry was huge. So Darul Arqam becomes the place to nurture people and say, you know what, before the intense animosity and bigotry out there, before you confront that, we want you to be in a safe space. We want you to be with us. We're not going to judge you. Come exactly as you came to campus and be with us. Hopefully over time, enough of interactions with us will convince you that you can actually be a better Muslim than whoever we claim to be or whatever position we hold in the MSA. If we don't believe that, then it's just a bunch of hype. Look at the history of this organization. The elders tell us They were forming these chapters in the 50s and the 60s. 63 is just the time when all of them came together to say, let's have a national organization. But you had MSAs in the 50s. They were not called the Muslim Student Association. They were modeling themselves after what was happening in England and the UK, after Islamic societies. So the Ivy Leagues, that's why they're not trying to be elite. Harvard doesn't have an MSA. It has a what? It has a Harvard Islamic Society, because that's what the graduates of the UK organizations brought with them when they came for further study to America. So Stanford has an Islamic society. It's not because they want to be, unique and cool, although sometimes they think they are, right? But the reality is what? That's what they did. And they tell us, we would have like a gathering for Muslim students. There'd be like 8 of us. So clearly we want more membership. So we just open it up and say, anybody should come. We'd go to orientation, tell people to come. Brother shows up, right? Walking towards them. Woman at his side. We don't know who she is. Walking together. This hand has a beer can in his hand. And the woman next to him. And he shows up. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum salam. Where are you from? Probably one of these countries, right? North Africa, Asia, wherever they were coming from. What's the first thing the current MSA would do? How would we react? What would be our way to say to this? You know what they did? They just kept going. They welcomed them, let them join. A couple weeks later, the man comes by himself. There's no woman next to him. Ask him what happened. Yeah, I came to understand that dating is really not the best way to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A couple weeks later, he comes back. The beer is still there. He comes back again a couple weeks later. What happened? No beer can. What happened there? Realized that being in a state of intoxication all the time, I should rather be intoxicated with the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanallah. And then weeks later and months later, elections come about, and guess who runs for office, or guess who's selected by their commitment to the faith. That transition is not a made-up story. It happens, it can happen every single day on college campuses. But we are the people that are inhibiting that from happening. We are the people who are basically standing in the way of the next Aisha coming from that campus, or the next Muhammad coming from that campus, or Omar, or Uthman, or Ali, or any of the others companions. May Allah be pleased with all of them. So when we talk about this, we have to take it seriously. And I'm coming now to the convention. That we have to start to look at it and say, man, with the number of issues going on, if I get stuck judging others based on my limited understanding of Islam, the only thing I can do, the only thing I will succeed in doing is pushing away another Muslim from joining the fold of the faith. The only thing I will succeed in doing if I'm judgmental. But if I realize that, especially when people introduce you and say, make a dua and say, oh Allah, make me what they think of me, and cover from them the faults that I really have. That keeps you humble. Because then you realize, good Lord, man, I'm just like 2 steps away from being that guy or that young woman. What's different between them and me? Maybe I just had a little bit, better friendship circle, so that pushed me in. But we have no idea what they dealt with. Maybe their masjid was so strict that they stopped going to the masjid. So they get to the college campus and they want to be welcomed, and they find out, subhanAllah, that we are also standing there as policemen and policewomen, preventing them from getting the most out of their faith. So this convention is a start, right? Are you speeding it up?
We have Q&A as well.
Oh, we have Q&A as well. I time myself so well, I do that for a living. So when he said something else, I was like, wow. So the convention is the same way. You will actually talk to people who've been coming to these conventions since the 70s and 80s. MSA convention, the ISNA convention, the MAS convention, ICNA convention, all of these conventions, right? Some of them say that we didn't talk to each other when we first saw each other because I thought I was better than so-and-so, and they thought they were better than me, and whatever. And soon you find out that in reality, all of us are struggling equally to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Quran gives us that guidance. The Quran teaches us that if you truly want to talk about walking the walk and talking the talk, then you have to study the Quran itself. Because in Surah As-Saf, there Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us two things which are relevant to this discussion about the journey. Addressing the believers. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu lima taquluna ma la taf'alun. Kabura maqtan inda Allahi an taqulu ma la taf'alun. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressing the believers saying, why is it that you say that which you do not do? Despiseful it is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you say that which you do not do. And this is, subhanAllah, something intense for us to think about and say, how much can I focus on myself? Now, this doesn't mean that you disappear from MSA, disappear from college campuses and say, you know what, I got to work on my own, I can't do anything else. No, we want each other to keep working not only on ourselves, but on our organizations and improve in the meantime. Not taking a vacation or walking away because who will be there left to do the work? In the convention, you should make it a point to see how many new people you can meet. Ask them what college campuses they're from. Ask them the struggles they're having. You will have executive roundtables. You will have other places to do, to that conversation. But one thing that I'm always baffled by, conventions are places of learning. You are college students. You pay good money to go to major universities, and you don't offend the instructors or the professors with showing up with no notebooks, no pens, no laptops. You would never do that because the impressions that you want to set are way too high. But in Muslim conventions, inevitably we treat it like edutainment. That, yeah, mashallah, man, it was good. Yeah, he had a couple of good jokes and, it was just a great lecture. What did you learn? I don't know, but the light was really bright and things were really awesome. If that's all we're going to get out of it, nothing's going to change. So take notes, remind yourselves and say, things may be bad. People may be intensely against us, systematically going against Islam, against the teachings of Islam, trying to offend us in every which way possible. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this light and perfecting the light. And this is where I'll end with Surah As-Saf also. He says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yuriduna liyutfiyu nur Allahi bi afwahihim. That they desire to extinguish the light of Islam or the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with their lips. This is all of social media. This is all of the propaganda campaign. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Wallahu mutimmu nurihi walau kariha al-kafirun. That indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala perfects the light even though it's hateful to the disbelievers or the people who cover the truth. So the journey is just beginning with this first session. Your college journey has already begun. Many of you raised your hands. All I can say to you is that the believers are supporters one to another. And this Surah As-Saf has so many lessons for organized work, Islamic work, for ways to get along with one another, and indeed to help, inshallah, those who may be looking to us and saying, you're standing between me and my love for Allah because of the way your interpretation of Islam is pushing me away from loving this faith and working for the religion. So either stand aside or at least let us change the tone in the tenor of the discussion by being more inclusive, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.